Good evening. Welcome to Southampton After Dark and the first of our Halloween heritage videos. To kick things off, we'll be looking at a chilling tale of the depths to which humans will sink to survive, and of how a single bad decision can have gruesome consequences. This is the story of Richard Parker, and how he and his fellow crewmates bit off more than they could chew. This is a story of disaster on the high seas, a desperate fight for survival, and the terrible crime committed to achieve it. This is Murder on the Mignonette. The Mignonette was a 52-foot-long, 33-ton yawl-rigged yacht, owned by an Australian named John Henry Want, who wished it to be sailed to Sydney, New South Wales. Heading the crew was Captain Tom Dudley, an experienced seaman Want could trust to get the job done. Skill and experience were vital, as there was much work to be done before the Mignonette could set sail for Australia. Putting in at Southampton, where she would be fitted out for her long trip, the first piece of bad luck which would befall the voyage occurred when some of the crew dropped out. Maybe they had a premonition of the horrors which lay ahead, maybe they weren't up to scratch, or maybe it was just their good fortune which saw them leave the doomed vessel. But whatever the cause, Dudley was in need of sailors, and fast. One of those he recruited was 17-year-old Richard Parker, a local seaman who lived in Itchen Ferry village. The village served as a crossing point for the River Itchen, and the local populace were a close community consisting of those working in the fishing trade. The families of the village provided captains and crews for a variety of yacht classes, and helped ferry Southampton residents across the grey expanse of the Itchen. This was the world Richard Parker grew up in, the world used to the salt and spit of the sea. But all the grit in the ocean couldn't prepare Parker for what awaited him. The Mignonette set out for Australia in May 1884. Joining Parker and Dudley were first mate Edwin Stevens and seaman Edmund Brooks. Safely aboard the yacht, the crew settled down to what they expected to be a routine voyage. The vessel touched at Madeira and crossed the equator on the 17th of June, but things took a turn for the worse on 5th of July. During stormy weather, Stevens was at the wheel when he gave a cry of terror. A colossal wave loomed over them, swelling above the four terrified seamen before crashing down like a hammer on the yacht, ripping apart her sails and rigging and barrelling its way through her insides. The Mignonette began to sink, and Dudley hurried below deck to salvage what supplies he could. As he grabbed the tins strewn about the hold, the seawater lapping around his legs, he must have wondered what was coming next. Even if they escaped the doomed yacht, who would come for them? Four unlucky seamen would be trapped thousands of miles from land in the middle of a raging sea, with no hope of rescue, dwindling food and water supplies, and only each other to rely on. While Parker, Stevens and Brooks piled into a lifeboat, Dudley lowered the food supplies to them, but he had not been able to fetch anything more than 2 tins of turnips before he was forced to abandon the Mignonette as the ocean claimed her. Over the coming days, huddled together in the lifeboat, the seamen battled blistering heat in the days and biting cold in the nights, their food supplies diminishing and their thirst so terrible that they began to drink their own urine. The boat drifted on. No other vessels in sight, and as the sun beat down on their skin, which had started to yellow and break out in sores, Dudley first suggested that one of them should be killed so that the others might feast on his corpse. On the 9th of July, the crew had caught a turtle and rationed it, but that food source, small as it was, had now run out. He proposed drawing lots to determine who would die. "Something else will come along," said Stevens. "Another turtle, maybe." "There is nothing else," said Dudley in frustration. His stomach was raw with hunger, his tongue turned black with lack of water. "I don't see any other way out, gentlemen." "Let us all die together," said Brooks. "I should not like anyone to kill me, and I should not like to kill anyone else." Dudley turned to Parker. "What about you, lad? You're very quiet." Parker looked at the others, these 3 older, more experienced men. He wished he could be home in Itchen Ferry village, watching people do nothing more difficult than row from one side of the Itchen to the other. "I agree with Edmund. I don't want to kill anyone," he said. With nothing decided upon, the men went back to their own private battles, Parker trying to resist the fierce temptation to drink from the sea. He had heard how drinking seawater could turn a person mad, and knew how physically dangerous it was to drink it, but his throat was ragged with thirst. Surely a few tins couldn't do much harm. He made his fateful decision and filled his beaker, hoping that the ocean that had earlier done its utmost to kill him would now save his life. Instead, it sealed his fate. He became seriously ill and lay down in the bow of the boat. With Parker close to death, Dudley was finally able to convince Stevens that the dying boy should be sacrificed so the others might live, reminding Stevens that they both had wives and children at home. It wouldn't be right to abandon their families, to not do everything they could to make it back to them. And was it not Dudley's duty, as captain, to get as many of his crew home as possible? He drew a penknife and stared at the shaking, pale mass in the bow of the boat. It was kill this barely alive bag of skin and bone or starve to death. His choice was made. He crawled over to Parker and placed the point of the knife to the boy's throat, begging God for forgiveness for what he was about to do. As Parker felt the knife at his neck, his eyes snapped open. "What, me?" he asked. Dudley pushed the knife into the boy's jugular vein, and blood rushed out as quickly as the sea had overwhelmed the Mignonette. The others used a bailer to catch the blood and gorged themselves on it, even Brooks taking his share. Then they set to work on the rest of the dead man, cutting open his belly and feeling their stomachs rumble eagerly at the sight of so much juicy meat. The liver was devoured first, followed by the still heart, and when that was done, they stripped the skin and hung it on the side of the boat to dry. The last thing to be removed was the head, which was dumped into the sea. Perhaps the thin wisps of men in the boat couldn't bear to stare at the last human part of the hunk of carved meat that had once been a living, breathing boy. What was going through their minds that night as they lay in the slowly drifting boat, the taste of Parker's blood still on their tongues? Maybe they didn't think at all and were driven by pure animal instinct. Maybe they blocked out the events of the past few hours and thought of home. Within days, the 3 survivors were rescued by a German vessel named the Montezuma, and next set foot on British soil at Falmouth. Dudley and Stevens were charged with murder, while Brooks, because he had not participated in the killing itself, was a witness for the prosecution. Dudley and Stevens were convicted of murder and sentenced to hang, but there was widespread public sympathy for them, and their sentence was reduced to 6 months' imprisonment. After being released from prison, Thomas Dudley left Britain for good, and moved to Australia, where he became a successful boat outfitter, albeit one that people nicknamed Cannibal Tom. He later died of the bubonic plague on 23rd of February 1900. Although Edmund Stevens would participate in later voyages, he suffered from mental health problems brought on by the horrific experience he had endured on the Mignonette, and also became an alcoholic. His marriage fell apart, and he died in poverty on 25th of June 1914. Edmund Brooks didn't last much longer, dying in Southampton on 22nd of July 1919. As for Richard Parker, the poor boy who left Itchen Ferry village for the adventure of a lifetime and never returned, a memorial to his memory was placed in Pear Tree Parish Churchyard, where it can still be seen today. With all that said, there's only one thing left to answer. If you were in that boat, what would you have done? We hope you've enjoyed the first of our Halloween heritage videos. Look out for more as the month goes on. Good night, and try not to have nightmares.